Hi, my name is Kelly Corcoran. I am the Interim Artistic Advisor for the Lexington Philharmonic, and we are so happy that you are joining us for our virtual Connect with Our Musicians. These are informal conversations and moments for connection with our musicians and community members about how music connects us to our world. This week, I will be talking with and interviewing members of the LexPhil percussion section and our harp player about some of their favorite moments with the orchestra, the vast repertoire, and more. So let's dive in and meet our players.
This is Jim Campbell. I'm the principal percussionist. I live in Lexington, Kentucky, and I've been with the LexPhil for 36 years.
My name is Brian Mason, and I'm the Associate Principal Percussion. I live in Moorhead, Kentucky, and I've been with the orchestra for 18 years.
My name is Brady Harrison. I am the principal timpanist with LexPhil, and I currently live in Cincinnati. I've been with the orchestra since 1999, so about 22 years.
I'm Elaine Cook, and I lived in Cincinnati when I first started playing with the Philharmonic, and we did our concerts at the Opera House, but we couldn't accommodate the whole audience in one concert, so we had pairs of concerts until they built Singletary, and now we can get most of the patrons usually in the hall at one time. And I'm sorry, I didn't add up the number of years, but started playing in the late 70s, and by 1980 I moved here, and then my fiance moved here to marry me, and then my parents moved here, so I'm a well-established transplant.
Well, it's great to be here with all of you. Jim, let's start with you since you are principal percussion. So I'd love to hear from you about what is it that you love about playing in the percussion section in the orchestra and serving as principal?
Well, it's fun for every concert you get. There's a new instrument. I might play snare drum. I might play orchestral chimes. I might be called to double on timpani for something if there's two timpanists needed, like if you're doing the planets. But there's a new instrument. I've played everything from a Peruvian cajon to conga drums to drum set. So every concert, every program is fun because there's new instruments. And as a percussionist, I enjoy being able to play a wide variety of instruments.
That leads me to Brian, because a question I have for you, Brian, is, kind of like Jim is saying, you play so many instruments when you're in the percussion section. Do you have a favorite percussion instrument to play and why?
Well, it's hard to pare that down, but I'd probably say vibraphone is my favorite instrument to play. I grew up as a drummer before going to university to study, and studied under Jim at UK and fell in love with the vibraphone. And actually, as an undergrad, started gigging and playing some jazz gigs and things like that. And it's just been an instrument that's really stayed with me for my entire career. And I'm very at home behind that instrument.
And so, Brady, you're the timpanist in the orchestra. And so I'd love to hear about what is different from playing, by being the timpanist, and what is the role of the timpani in the orchestra. And, when we look at orchestral repertoire from, Mozart to more contemporary rep, how has that role of the timpani changed over time?
Okay, yeah, this is an interesting conversation for me to have with you because I actually view the role of the timpanist as being the conductor from the back. So I really like to be aware of what's going on across the orchestra, especially because I'm kind of in the back and you're on top of things. The role of timpani for me largely is, it's a support role, and how it functions varies by composer and, and when the piece was created and, all the specificities of the actual work. But, sometimes it's color, sometimes it's support, but I feel like all the time I can set a tone that affects in a way that's almost intangible the way that everybody else responds in the orchestra rally. So, but really, I feel like timpani governs the contour of a piece, the tension. And I've thought of it that way since I was nearly a kid in studying. So I studied with like Cloyd Duff and his students, which were Paul Yonch's principal in Cleveland and principal at Atlanta. And I actually did my undergraduate at Vanderbilt. I was first graduate for Blair School. I know your head, we are in Nashville. And so my mentor there, Bill Wiggins, also all of them kind of follow that same mantra of being the conductor from the back, trying to observe what the conductor is doing and support that for the entire orchestra.
Yeah, and I think, you've raised a lot of really important points, right? That every player plays their role in this complex organism of the orchestra. And I think, what is unique about all of you here today on this call is that you're, while you may be part of a section like the percussion section, the instrument you are playing may be the only one at that time in the orchestra. There may be only one triangle, or whatever it is that you're playing. And so that leads me to you, Elaine, because I think oftentimes there's only one harp in an orchestra. So what is that like to be the one and only harp player in the midst of this repertoire? And how do you see your role in that context?
First thought on that is that as much work goes into the entrances, making the entrance at the right time, as goes into learning how to play the part. And so I love to have a score if I can. You can usually find a recording of a piece, even if it's a new piece. Sometimes there's a private link to, even sometimes it's just on, they're composing on MIDI, and so it might be that. But the score is really your best friend in figuring out who exactly is playing. Sometimes I'll write the thing that I'm kind of jumping in after or with, and knowing who's playing while I'm playing, so that I know what I'm listening for. It's almost, orchestral playing is almost like chamber music, because you have to really listen to the other sections. Like, I like to be wedged in between the winds and the strings, because then I can hear both of those. I can see the basses, and of course the timpani feels like the ground of the orchestra. It's always holds it all together. But I was drawn to orchestral harp playing specifically, and was halfway through a bachelor's degree, and my parents had just finally scraped up the money to buy this harp. And suddenly I realized, oh, the solo repertoire for this instrument is not very good quality. And so maybe I want to change to cello. But I didn't go through with that. But so I'm specifically drawn to harp because of playing orchestral harp. That's what I love to do.
And okay, so talking about repertoire and specific pieces, this brings me back to you, Jim. And, do you have a favorite piece of orchestral repertoire, and why?
Several, but I think for me, Igor Stravinsky, The Rite of Spring, 1913, that was the breaker for my profession. At the time when we were experiencing composers that were trying to, the tonality was changing. Stravinsky wrote with a lot of pitch centers rather than keys. Even the winds and brass, the winds and strings in that piece are very percussive. I think there's 5 timpani, Brady. Is that right? Rite of Spring is 5 timpani, soloistic parts for that. Stravinsky indicated the mallets he wanted to use. I mean, he was very specific. He used a lot of instruments, a large section, even indicating at one point to scrape, the gong with the triangle beater. So, I mean, percussion became an equal member of the orchestra with Stravinsky, and the meter changes he employed, and the primitivism of the material, especially the Rite of Spring. That's the iconic one, I think, for me. And as far as beautiful melodies, I always loved The Planets by Gustav Holst, and there's 2 timpanists, I think 2T plus 3 or 4 in that section. I can't remember, but it's just great percussion playing there too, but just very tuneful melodies that every section has a chance to play, including the timpani has the melody in one spot. So those are the 2 that stand out for me.
Okay, Brian, I'm coming back to you. So, here we are talking about orchestral repertoire, playing in an orchestra, how unique and amazing that is. What is it about playing in an orchestra that is important and special for you personally? Because I know you teach, and many of us on this call, we teach, we wear many hats. And during COVID, we haven't had the opportunity to be playing in an orchestra. So what role does orchestral music play in your personal life?
That's an interesting question, because it seems like orchestral repertoire in one way, shape, or form has touched every aspect of my professional life and personal life. even when I was doing drum and bugle corps, we were always programming orchestral repertoire at the groups that I taught. And but specifically with the Lexington Phil, it, being a part of that community is really amazing. The work within the section is a lot of fun. It's challenging to interact with people on the stage that are 40, 50 feet away from you, and trying to get the timing down and the communication and blending, and there's really nothing like it.
So Brady, do you have a favorite LexPhil memory?
I've got lots of great LexPhil memories, but and I think of some that pop up, like playing the Russell Peck Concerto with Jim and Brian, for example. That was a lot of fun. Brahms 1, it's just always fun to play, and that's great repertoire for what I do. But I was thinking about this, and like I think one of my favorite memories that I can recall is actually Respighi, like Pines of Rome, the trilogy, actually, going down the Appian Way. And it's not like it's flashy, it's just, it gradually builds, and just the power of feeling everything in that space in the orchestra. That, I think, is one of certainly one of my favorite recollections with the orchestra.
So much great repertoire. Okay, so Elaine, what do you love about the harp?
It's one of those things like, what made you fall in love? It's just, when I was playing principal violin in the junior high orchestra, and somebody discovered a harp in the basement, there was a harpist, and so she started 3 students from the string section, and that's just what I wanted to do. They were doing Carousel that year, and I looked at that score like that, and I was used to playing one line at a time, so I thumbed through it, and there were all these chords and things, but the last one was one note at a time. They were all arpeggios for the blockbuster You'll Never Walk Alone. So I said, oh, I can do that. So I learned that to the best of what I could do at that point. But to what Jim was saying about Stravinsky and breaking the ground for new instrumentation in the orchestra, the thing that is not so fun about the harp is that for being one of the very first instruments evolving from the bow and arrow, it was really the last instrument to evolve to its current orchestral harp stage, where you can play in all the keys, you have all your sharps and flats. And so composers like Beethoven didn't really respect it, because the action didn't work if it was too humid. And so how are you going to write that into the orchestra? And also there was a thing that some people aren't aware of. The classic form of symphony and concerto did not allow for expanded orchestra. So Berlioz is known for breaking the ground there, adding harp, and was it, do you have tenors? Oh, English horn, tenor sax. So the harp repertoire, there's no harp, and Brahms is my favorite composer. And talking about my favorite pieces for orchestra, The Rite of Spring and Till Eulenspiegel, and for all the wonderful Stravinsky and Strauss that there is for orchestra, there are no harp parts in those 2 pieces. But yeah, so the repertoire is more contemporary, and so I don't get to play in Mendelssohn or Beethoven, Mozart, Haydn. The harp just wasn't. It was more of a diatonic instrument at that point.
It's definitely interesting how instrument evolution plays into repertoire availability and how those things relate to each other, for sure. Well, thank you all for sharing this time and this conversation with all of us and with our audience here in Lexington. And we look forward to future conversations with you, and to our audience, we hope to see you again at future virtual conversations. And we look forward to seeing you at future performances as well.